Welcome everybody, the room is packed. This is the second day of our talks program here at Capsule Plaza. My name is Paul Cornet. I am co-curator of the event with Alessio Ascari. We have the rest of the team here. I've seen Felix and Daria over here. We are launching the third issue of Capsule Magazine, including a contribution of Samuel Ross and KOHLER inside. So we are extremely pleased that these gentlemen have been making time in their busy schedule to spend time and have a conversation with us. Later on we will have more talks and tomorrow as well. Nifemi, thank you. Samuel, Michael, it's a huge honor to receive you guys here at Spazio Maiocchi. I hope you guys are ready for some conversation together. So I will just give you like a sort of brief intro so everybody is well introduced. Samuel Ross is a designer and artist based in London. He studied graphic design and illustration and then was first intern and design assistant for late Virgil Abloh before launching his own fashion label, A Cold Wall, in 2014. In 2019, Samuel launched SRA to explore the world of industrial design and architecture. His works, whether in fashion or industrial design, or as an artist, is rooted in the exploration of class and social aesthetics, often described as rooted in the aesthetic of brutalism and deconstruction. Thank you, Samuel. Nifemi Marcus Bello, a Lagos-based designer whose works explores manufacturing, production, aesthetics through a specifically African history and visual culture. Known for his community-led approach to design, using his works to explore materials in this specific context and creating new typologies and forms from his starting point. Michael Seum is the VP Global Director at KOHLER and an award-winning design executive. KOHLER is a global leader in manufacturing for kitchen, bathroom, and energy products, founded in 1873 in Wisconsin, USA. We have been behind this incredible project with Samuel Ross, which launched last year during Miami and has this year incredible installation in Milan for Salone in a moment where KOHLER is celebrating 150 years. So congratulations on the beautiful installation you guys have been putting together. I've seen it yesterday in this incredible palazzo. So maybe just to start a conversation, I would like to talk about this collaboration with KOHLER. If you guys are curious, we've also included an interview inside the last issue of Capsule, run by our editor Felix. So I think it's incredible. I've also seen it in Miami in December. Can you tell us how this collaboration came about? Maybe Samuel, you can start about that and tell us how maybe KOHLER or you approached them and what was the brief?
Yes, well, firstly, thank you all for being here. It's been like a super busy week, so I appreciate your time. And, we've all been quite excited to be able to speak in this forum. And as you were saying earlier, to have a slightly more elastic and relaxed conversation of sorts. There might be moments where we kind of like pass the mic around so we can socialize the conversation as well. I'm going to try to keep what I kind of respond to here quite organic and open for you all too. So the first meeting between myself and KOHLER happened in Design Miami in 2021, which was kind of difficult because it was my first debut there with Friedman Bender, and I'd been working on like a series of marble steel, CNC powder-coated steel, volt orange pieces, and there was also a panel talk. But this is, of course, the same week in which Virgil passed in that year, so it was a really heavy revelation of sorts. And we then went into one of the group talks with Craig Robbins and the leadership team of KOHLER. And there was just like a synchronicity surrounding what could happen in industrial design. And the assistance of Daniel Arsham, who's a dear friend, also was gracious enough to give like a formal introduction to the KOHLER leadership team. Instantly, there was just this interest in looking at where there are still almost unseen conversations within design of our generation. And the toilet felt like a place to have a conversation, the bathroom. These are still engagements that are deeply intimate that we all have to deal with daily. And I was interested in seeing if we could have a slightly more like catalyzing or antagonistic conversation within that category of goods.
Great, yeah. I mean, I feel the outcome is very surprising. Some of you might have seen it, the faucets and the toilets, hyper iconic in a way. They are like instant classics. You will see some on the screen, some of these photos. I can imagine working on industrial products takes a while. It's a very different practice than you designing your own art or design pieces with a gallery. So I'm turning maybe the mic to you, Michael. You maybe tell us a little bit more about the process at KOHLER, who's a global brand working on a wide range of products, but here taking the leap in collaboration and taking risk eventually in working with a new designer, trying to come with a bold and radical design such as this one. Can you tell us about how research operates and how at KOHLER you manage to embed such special project in this global company?
Yeah, I think the overall journey has been about 2 years in the making, right? Yes. From start to where we're at today. But this journey, I think, is just beginning. So I think it's KOHLER, as you said at the beginning, is a 150-year-old company, a long history of driving innovation and doing bold leadership through design. And I think this collaboration, and maybe collaboration is not the word, it was a co-studio creation, right? Because I think we've shared a lot of creativity back and forth between our studios, and I think it was an evolving process. And I know Samuel spent some time in our archives looking at our history, but really challenging where the future is going to take us. And I think this is, not to get into process, because I don't think the journey was sort of the process here of exploration. And as I said, I think we're still on this process, and I give, credit to the Samuel Ross team, but I think it's really, we gave them a lot of freedom to create this expression and challenge us and to think about this bold future that we need to create.
And just to add to that, Nifemi and I were talking just before this talk about the importance of having, highly specialized teams, right? And it goes without saying, we tried to move away from the idea of like a collab or like a collabo or like a one and done, which has maybe been a bit of a cesspool in the most part of the recent years. And we wanted to move to the idea of maturing, I guess, maybe not necessarily long form, but mid-term collaborations between like 2 to 3 year, multi-year partnerships, which gives like, independent small studios and, market incumbents such as, KOHLER, time to actually figure out a language and to be able to dance and communicate with one another. And as you rightly said, it's not like one designer, it's an entire team of specialized experts. SRA is built of architects and primarily lawyers, and without them, we wouldn't be able to actualize some of these products to come about. And Nif, maybe you could even speak about, one, I want to know what you think about the category and the forms itself, and then also just a little bit about how you're also building your team and how you engage between the space of abstract industrial art but also functional object.
I think for me, about 3 years ago, I kind of split my studio into half. So there's a commercial side and then the artistic side. And with the commercial side, like you've just said, it takes a village basically to build products, and finding the expertise from my side of town, which is Lagos, Nigeria, can be tough. So I think one of the things that I've kind of noticed or I've done so far is actually figure out a way to institutionalize my team members or bringing them in through via institutions. So speaking to people like Central St. Martin's, asking them specifically if they have African designers who are looking for placements, and then bringing them to Lagos. And then also, there's also a side of making sure that not everybody on the team is a designer, like you said. There's an admin side to design that's usually and always an afterthought, especially if you're practicing at a large scale or small scale, either way. So even now, the team kind of crosses across Africa. So the studio manager is based in Nairobi. I have another designer who just joined from Loughborough University, moving to Lagos as well. So just building a team has been something fascinating to me as a designer, a side that I never thought of. So yeah.
And there's a real focus here on the future of small, highly, pertinent and agile studios being totally decentralized, right? by design. Like, it doesn't make sense to necessarily homogenize design talent to exist in one particular silo. Like, the fact that you have, you know, one base on one side of the equator and the other base on the other side is almost like the beauty of, I guess, different perspectives coming about. And that's kind of what we tried to achieve with the co-studio concept. It was the idea of like having different, literally like terminals, all kind of procreating and throwing ideas together, as long as they kind of sat under this one requisite that we tried to develop. And that requisite was more so this thought of moving water. You know, when I think about KOHLER now, when I think about the bathroom, I'm also thinking about the safe delivery of water through a tureen or through a vessel. And historically, especially when you think about the placement within a Milanese palazzo, it's been used under that rhetoric for at least 4 to 5 centuries. So the idea of being able to repurpose that for the now was really at the forefront. And through that process, it kind of unlocked new patents that we decided to co-file, and new materials that we've been able to commercialize, while also removing waste and excess materials from the actual production process, which, you know, Michael will be able to speak to a bit more.
Yeah. How was, you know, when I see the outcome is indeed quite unconventional. I said radical earlier. Did you, Samuel, have to come up with like lots of iteration before coming to that design, and were you being rejected with some of your design, or was that your kind of first idea, the sort of genius sketch that was embraced very quickly by the team? I'm curious about the ping pong, because as you know, as Nifemi is saying, also working with, it's a very different thing if you're working on yourself and you work with, you know, a large manufacturer. So and sometimes it feels that, or at least, you know, that's what people usually say or hear, that it can be difficult, you know, to be radical and at the same time develop projects that are, you know, for all houses across the globe. So I'm curious, like, how that ping pong worked, if it was natural collaboration and you were pushing and they were pushing, and if you were coming up with sketches and they were challenging you in terms of materiality and production processes.
I think you raised like a really good point there, where like we wanted to humanize the design process a little bit more, and by doing so, it all kind of started from like sketches. So charcoal, ink, pen, pencil, watercolors. Beyond that just being like a super enjoyable medium to traverse, I wanted to try and invite serendipity and mistake making into the process, to not have too much of a consolidated or fixed design language, because of course we work cross category in SRA between like luxury goods and industrial design and wearables, and you've got to try and battle yourself at times before you even get to the client to have that conversation, in honor of there being like a category specific partnership. So hundreds of, you know, hand sketches, not just because I think they look really nice, but more so to try and find quirk and error and invite serendipity into play. So it literally started from thinking about the relationship we have to water, splitting that into almost 2 silos. One, again, being the sheer volume of water which moves beneath our feet and has done to enable modernity to reach this point. And of course, KOHLER's been doing that for 150 years. So it didn't necessarily feel too esoteric to put that type of thought or perspective forward. The second was more so the physics of water to be able to reshape stone or mineral or material. And you kind of see that in formation around the tap, which is like this asymmetric zigzag, and playing with the liquidity of water and trying to produce something which is very gestural, because the main material or matter passing through the tap can handle that type of tension. The second component on Formation 02 was trying to produce something which felt like it belonged to the language and canon of the SRA studio and work that I'd done prior in different categories. We wanted to have a signature, but we also wanted to have room for like newness to come about, but we didn't want it to feel too fixed. Hence why most of this was done by hand before, you know, Aman and Logan, or, you know, before the industrial team on Michael's side, Gary and Niels took those drawings and put them into a reality.
And I'll go back to the point on radical design, radical engineering, and I think for KOHLER it's a very comfortable place. I think our CEO is deeply involved in the design process. I mean, deeply involved, and I spend a lot of time. So I think it was a very comfortable place for us to explore. But I think one of the key things, I mean, we're 7 studios globally, but our KOHLER Wisconsin team sits literally in the factory. And I think we had multiple times where I would look at product and I actually got a chance to slip cast the faucet and really get close to the making, the creation, this process across the board. And I think, for us working with Samuel and his team, that challenge was really radical in the sense that we got so close to making these products. I mean, we're making a very limited edition, and we're making things that we've never made before. And that is very important in the process of doing so, or really the journey, not even a process. It was the exploration that brought this forward.
I was just thinking actually earlier, we had the chance actually to invite Nifemi last year to write a little piece in the last issue of Capsule, which was very touching. Is the year you received the Design Hublot Award as well in London, which I'm sure you and Samuel are very close friends from a long time. And you had this take on anonymous design, and you wrote this piece, we photographed, we documented that in the streets of Lagos. And talking about process, I feel you could really add to that conversation and maybe just tell us a little bit more about this idea of anonymous design and what it means for you from a designer based in Lagos.
I think for me, I'll start with the images of Samuel actually visiting the factory. I tend to look at Lagos in itself as my own personal factory because I make things in like different types of hubs within Lagos. Anywhere anything is being made, I kind of go into an investigation mode and then figure out how I can actually make something within my studio with the artisans. And the reason why I actually started the anonymously designed object research was because I went to university in England. I was working for a couple of years and I really wanted to move back to Lagos. I get to Lagos, I tell people I'm moving back to Lagos and they tell me design doesn't exist in Lagos, contemporary design doesn't exist, and that I probably would be wasting my time. But after actually just picking everything up and moving back, I realized that design was actually happening but from a grassroots level. So in Lagos, you see a lot of people using upcycled materials, again, actually looking into the city to create objects, day-to-day objects that can enhance their daily lives or enhance their experience. And I think one of the objects that I really focused on was the Kwali, which was a handheld kiosk used to sell confectionaries in like traffic jam in Lagos. And while I was doing that, I kind of went back to basic of what design is, which is understanding an assembly line, understanding what manufacturing possibilities are, and even if you're doing tooling, knowing fully well that the investment will eventually pay off. So it's a mindset that I've kind of taken into within my studio when it comes to a commercial side. So if, for example, a brand reaches out to the studio, the first thing to do is find out how they make what they make. And the best way to do that is to engage with the engineers, engage with the designers, go into their archives, and have conversations with maybe even other users of the object as well. So that's where I kind of find myself in Lagos most of the time, creating these archives. And that's why I'm showing at the Stedelijk in Rotterdam in June. So, yeah.
Nice, amazing. And then indeed, if even though probably I see a lot of similarities between you both's work and also a lot of differences. You operate in 2 different continents. But I was just looking on Instagram at your old posts, and then I was trying to define your work through just images, and I was realizing how much bold colors you were using in all of your work. These powder coated, coffee tables that were shooting in the streets of Lagos, and then looking at the work of Samuel as well, that has been using this bold orange color as sort of a trademark of his work here. So maybe this is also a point I think we could have to sort of compare or join your forces. How this idea of bold color came about, what's the tell us a bit more.
It's funny. It started off as a joke for me, in a way that I would always ask myself, why is it that in Lagos we always wear color, but then our houses aren't as colorful?
Yeah.
When you go inside the house, they're quite bland. And when I did the first stool, I actually showed it to my mom, and she was like, "What is this? No one's gonna put this in their house." And I think one of the reasons why I started playing with color is that I feel like for me, I live my life in a way where I'm a contemporary African. And most contemporary Africans know exactly what they want within their space. So I wanted to give people options and not just have raw material finish, which is what I kind of grew up with. And if you notice, the artistic work that I actually show is usually, there's never any finish with it. So the aluminum, the bronze, etc. But when it comes to commerce, I wanted it to be as radical as possible and maybe try to figure out a way to dictate new spaces within the Lagos context. So if you go into a home in Lagos, you probably will never find a red stool, right? But maybe creating something radical and creating a tribe through that product, saying, okay, maybe I can live this way within this space, and this kind of creates a dent within the ecosystem. So I'm also noticing that a lot of young designers coming out from Lagos always ask me as well, saying, why did you start using color? And I've embraced it heavily. So that's yeah.
And I feel also it's maybe something. I was talking with Sabine, with whom we had a talk yesterday, and she had this point of saying that yeah, this is actually very interesting, because I think especially us in Europe, there's this sort of tendency, or sort of we're a bit in an era where our homes also here are all very greyish and beige. It's this like neutral palette of color, and everything blends together. But your work is obviously extremely, it's bold, and then this orange color is, yeah, as I was saying, is a sort of a trademark. So what is your perception of use of color in your work, and how did that come about?
I think there are probably like two sides to it. The first is more so like a counterweight to a lot of the storytelling I told in A Cold War, which in that case, the color palettes are deeply desaturated, and I'm also looking at public housing, perhaps some of the failings of council estates in the UK and brutalism where it wasn't opted properly. And the idea was to illuminate the lack of color and use these softer desaturated tones to talk about the perceptibility of not being seen through environment and through architecture and in that case color. When it came to SRA, there was this opportunity to have a slightly more optimistic conversation and to use scale and color together to amplify impact in space, in which color almost becomes this like architectural tool to hold the visual. It holds more visual space, because as we're all saying, it's such an intense. It has such an intensity, the primary color use, that you don't necessarily engage with it openly and often. And there was another channel of thought was really looking at like the lineage of British sculptors over the past like 50 to 60 years, thinking about Hepworth to Moore and Caro. Even thinking about like German graphic designers / painters in the 50s, such as Joseph Albers, and how they'd used European color theory. And obviously being partly European but also African and Caribbean, there's almost like a dialysis between how you relate to certain movements that you feel that you're of, but you also are not of. So often color is used to hijack space and to reflect normalcies that you experience through design culture in education. Orange is typically used because it's relatively fleeting in terms of how we engage with it. It's usually reflecting some type of urgency or temporal placement. If you think about traffic cones or the work of the Vanellis and how they use it in their signage on like the New York subway, it's always to alert or bring a sense of vigilance, but maybe not danger. It still has this kinetic appeal, which I'm quite into. And more so, it just holds public space so well and can bring about questioning. And that's really why color is a focal point in the practice.
Cool. Yeah, we were talking about radical and being bold. And I think the color is bold and the shapes are bold, but I was reading a little bit about it, talking about the engineering, the sort of system and the innovation in the products. So maybe Michael also, can you tell us more how this collaboration has brought innovation to the company, and what kind of innovation have you been trying to bring in these projects? on different levels?
Well, I think Samuel talked a little bit about the material innovation, and obviously, what you see through the two projects that have come through, Formation 1 and Formation 2, there's a deep material exploration here. And while I can't share where we're going to take it, I can assure you that we're very much interested in exploring materials and how to use materials sustainable-wise. And I want to go back to something that Nifemi said around starting in the factory. And we just launched a product that's shown in the fair that's created 100% from our factory waste, our pottery coal. And it's this beautiful mosaic-like material that's created a basin out of waste. And we actually have a studio across the street from the design studio called the Waste Lab. We've done some partnerships with Nada Debs on creating some tiles, 100% out of factory coal. So I think this exploration of material feeds upon itself. And I'm not 100% sure where we'll take some of these things, but I can assure you that we're looking at them internally, and Samuel's helped start to activate that through conversations around how we make things, why we make them the way we are, and looking maybe if there's a different way to do it. And both products are just radical departures from how we've done things in the past. But they're opening the doors to new thinking, and I promise to show you some of that in the future.
Cool.
I just want to add to that. So I had this thought, a lot of the innovation that came about in terms of Neonite, which was one of the new materials that was patented and created, which is a recycled epoxy resin for Formation 01, or whether it's the choice to move away from slip casts into 3D printing recycled materials for Formation 02, the toilet. This came about as a result of the slightly more purist approach to starting from these gestural hand sketches. And I think from the beginning of the partnership, we only felt like it could work if we were trying to break things or push things forward. Like this idea, and you do this in your work as well, via color, or even, in terms of the juxtaposition of how the work is placed into, modernity in streets or antagonizing within the home. I think what does kind of drive all of us here to a degree is this behavior of trying to almost like frack and mine for newness. I don't think, that we're necessarily interested as designers in just extending the cycle of postmodern design or modernism or minimalism, which are canons which have been completed. If we were to do so, it would literally be like the death of the future. So there's this deeper pursuit to just iterate and explore and to be at risk publicly with ideas. And that can't necessarily come to scale without partners such as KOHLER, and when you think about KOHLER, it's a private company which has been in the family for 5 generations, which still produces on site. You don't get these type of projects or products or breakthroughs without that occurring. And as Michael was saying, sometimes it's not actually about how to take concept to mass scale. It's more so the exercise of fracking for newness and trying to generate newness to a degree.
I think something that kind of connects you guys is the fact that you are multi-hyphenates, that you work on so many fields. And I appreciate that the fact that also innovation, I feel, is probably translated in your design product as much as your industrial product, or working in fashion and across art. So yeah, maybe back to you, Nifemi, on this you as well, working at different scales and different types of assignments. How do you juggle that? Do you still first see yourself as a quote designer, or do you feel there's something beyond that it's just been, everything has been designed already, that you maybe see your work going beyond that?
It's funny because I feel like I'm still trying to figure out who I am or what I do. And the reason I say that was because I was European trained, right? And I went to design school, and the way I was taught was a certain way, so Dieter Rams kind of design. But then moving to Lagos and looking at the context of that, and then also working across the globe, you realize that there's an ethnographic approach to design that you have to kind of consider. So for me, what I try to do is I try to understand what work should be commercial and what work needs to be art. And with the artistic work that I tend to show or do, it's because I'm trying to pose questions and figure things out when it comes to materiality within the context of which I live, or materiality within the context of which I am being brought into to investigate. So for example, maybe I have a residency program where I'm speaking to a museum in Rotterdam. What does that look like when I want to design something with textiles? So I'm looking at how West Africa's relationship within the Dutch Empire, and speaking to people from Suriname, for example, and looking at how they kind of interact with textiles and the similarities between Suriname and Nigeria in itself. So I think my artistic practice kind of poses questions, and then the commercial side kind of answers questions, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Samuel, what's your take on that? Do you see yourself as a designer? Are you still trying to define yourself? How do you see yourself?
You know, it's a weird one because you get asked this a lot.
Yeah.
You know, like, it was multidisciplinary. You phrased it better. Multi-hyphenate sounds way better phonetically. But it's more so like moving out of the remit of seeing a single career pathway and more so looking at a life's work. And I think that naturally, if you have an affinity or interest or sensitivity to texture, material, and environment, you end up looking at the secular use cases and the non-secular use cases, where I'd put art directly into, you know, the non-secular, where there's more so a philosophical arm or higher purpose to be reconciled with. And that's something that really belongs to everyone. It's more so, there's been a little bit of disparity of who gets to exercise those liberties. And I guess the inquiry across a life is to understand that you have liberties in both the functional and in the non-functional and the spiritual and the philosophical. And naturally that means that you kind of ebb and flow between, you know, art with a capital A, or it might be design. I find it's more a case of, I have an interest in the both, and both are gratifying. But as Nifemi was saying, they both have different faculties as to why they exist, and one doesn't need to silo themselves to either.
I think the idea of just being a creator, and it's, you know, it's and I link it back to why we've done this partnership is, you know, KOHLER's had a 50-year program where we've brought artists into our factories, and we've given them the power of industrial tools to just create art. And I think for any designer, any artist, the start of just doing something is the process. It's the journey. And I think, you know, we're in a world where you can flow in between. And, you know, I think that's incredibly personal to me. I love to do art just to distract from my design time. And sometimes it inspires the other side of me as well. And, you know, I guess I don't need the definition other than just create something.
Yeah.
I think I want to add to that, because I was actually asked by journalists like 2 hours ago, saying, or told by a journalist that my work is social, but then it's also beautiful. So what does that mean? And one of the things I told him is like, aesthetics and beauty should be democratic. It's not, you understand, it shouldn't be placed in such high regards like, oh my God, only beauty should be here. For me, I think it's something that people should also be able to see, feel, touch in their daily lives, regardless of the social, economical aspect of their life, basically. So that's what I meant to add.
I have so many like buzzwords to add here. Like, what is beauty and what is emotion? And like, how do we solicit emotion? And, you know, what is it to be moved, I think is really important. And I think there is like, I don't know if, I wouldn't say our work is like political, but there's a sense of liberty and understanding what it is, honestly, to be in a place where you're not solely defined by genealogy and race. It's more so you're defined by a set of human experiences, and you use those experiences as levers. So again, there is a radicalness in, you know, the color profile, the seeing, and there being a juxtaposition of, you know, being taught in the West, but knowing that we're not of the West. And there's a sense of freedom when you live between grey areas and ambiguous spaces, where you get these different views that are maybe a little bit more anamorphic or isometric, which give you maybe a slightly more skewed or obscure perspective. And I think the beauty in playing in the obscure is that it's completely undefined. You know, if we think about like the Formation 01 toilet, for example, if the lid doesn't open, it's a piece of sculpture. It's only when there's a gesture that you then give it a new context. And the idea of being able to live with art, which is relevant for our generation and our times, feels like quite an important matter. And I guess that's why we kind of live between design and art, because design solicits haptics and function and servitude, which means that you can have a much more cadenced dance with the user. You get to play with temperature, heat, material, placement, volume, and scale. Often when it comes to being in the presence of art, there's still this taboo of maybe not being able to touch. It's more so you're in the presence of a cathedral, whereas design is very, very physical, the same way that fashion is very, very physical.
And even from, if you look at it from a lot of the research I've done on African design in the past, you can never tell if an object is design or art. So you look at a stool, like you just said, the toilet. You look at it and you don't know if you're going to sit on it or just place it in the corner and treat it as art. So for me, again, carrying out all this research, it's like, I don't think I need a definition. I always tell the next generation, you can actually do whatever you want to do, as long as there's an ecosystem to kind of support the commercial side, if it's commercial work or artistic work.
Yeah, do you feel in that sense, maybe Samuel, how much, you know, like I see your vision about Lagos and being inspired about the culture. You're someone that grew up in London, and yesterday at the dinner I feel that you were surrounded by this younger generation of upcoming designers and talents, and you've been very, I think, involved in, like, you know, supporting others and the new generation, and you always talk and, you know, support in any way you can the new generation. And I feel in the UK, and more specifically in London, there's this like upcoming generation of people working across design and art. And while I feel probably our generation, we were a bit more into boxes. It's like you were going to school and to just study design or architecture and art, and that's what you're going to do for the rest of your life. But yesterday in the conversation I had with some of them, it felt like, yes, they were creative minds, and they were not sure yet whether they would land into the art box or the design box. And could you tell us a bit more about, you know, how important it is for you to, you know, raise this new generation and be involved in you know, fostering all these talents, whether it's in London and elsewhere?
Yeah, I think there are like 2 points there. One is like, it's still like, get like a bachelor's degree or a master's to play first, because we need to be super pragmatic, where like, you can kind of skydive if you still have like, you know, some type of parachute. And the fundamental classic education in design is your parachute, where if anything goes wrong or fucks up, you know you can go into an agency and you can rebuild and learn from those who have come before you. You need to be able to kind of ebb and flow between conglomerates and being independent. You know, like, it's not necessarily one way or the other. You know, like, V was at architecture firms before he then went on to, you know, change the face of design. Before I went in to work with him and other studios, I also was at design firms and marketing firms after graduating. You know, Nifemi has, you know, more than one degree and, you know, has been in and out of these commercial practices. And I think that it's really important to ascertain that being creative and having a career in the creative arts and in the discipline of the creative arts are two different things. And you want to be able to fuel both of those batteries. When it comes to like peers and contemporaries, I don't really see it as like older gen and younger gen, because like we all know this whole like feeling of being able to articulate design and be under the age of like 45 is new, and it didn't exist in agency and design culture 10, 15 years ago when we were all kind of cutting our teeth at, you know, respectable agencies. So it's more so like there's maybe a couple who've been doing it a little bit longer, but I don't think that makes anyone, you know, any more proficient. It's more so trying to find where ladders can be placed and like hidden doors can be placed to make it more proficient if you see exceptional people who should be contributing globally. You know, like Kazim comes to mind, Nosa comes to mind, Nigel comes to mind. If I miss anyone's name, please do not be upset. Disclaimer. You know, but these are, you know, some of the names that you were mentioning who are working across AI, you know, LLM models or LLM models, or they might be working across architecture or visual communication. And it's less about like having like a younger gen, it's more so just having peers and contemporaries that you actually believe should be there and can probably do far more than what we can do if we're able to assist in any capacity.
You know, I want to add about this this relationship we have with Samuel, because I think you've taught our team a ton, and I think these type of partnerships help a lot. And as a design leader in a large corporation, it's probably my sole responsibility to grow the youngest talent into future design leaders that are brave enough to step in and build these type of partnerships that drive this radical thinking. So it's really important to me, and I'll do a little pitch here because I've got 20 open roles across 7 studios across the globe. So I'm actively looking for some really young, aggressive talent.
Yeah, portfolios are welcome after the talk.
And I wanted to add to what Samuel was saying about building an ecosystem, because it's funny, one of the first major engagements we had was, and I know he wasn't going to say anything, but it was me actually applying to one of his grants. And I was actually in Rwanda, finishing off a project, and then it was middle of COVID, had to move back to Lagos. And when I got back to Lagos, I had seen this, I can't remember who sent it to me. I think it was someone that worked with Daniel Ashram, but someone sent it to me, and I was like, oh, this is a really good opportunity, but not just for me, but maybe for figuring out a way to kind of engage within the community of Lagos. So when the grant was given, actually, I created a product within Lagos, having various designers on it, various artisans on it. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was literally just poured in. And the product did really well. I mean, we won a few awards, the Wallpaper Design Award. And I just broke it to him outside that I think even MoMA is interested in putting it in an exhibition next year. So building things like this, I think it's very, very crucial and important. Yeah. So I appreciate you.
I appreciate a young fledgling economy, which, you know, SMEs and studios can flourish in. I don't have that much to add to it, but I don't know, I just want to make sure that there's this real cadence and understanding that, you know, creativity can be propagated to develop like its own economy as well. And it sounds a bit wordy, but it's absolutely the truth, where like you can kind of start from ground up as long as you have like a foundational education in place. And I guess that's why the grant system kind of came about, because it felt like there were these amazing talents who are friends and peers now, part of like a wider generation, and it was just trying to find a way to bring us a bit closer together, but to also make sure there's like archival material which lives outside of press and media, so that the contributors generationally aren't necessarily having to partake in a popularity game. It's more so about the skills they have to offer. Yeah.
Amazing. Just to wrap up the talk before we give the mic to the audience, what's next? What are you guys cooking? What's coming up? Nifemi, I know you're working on a great show next to my home in Schiedam, next to Rotterdam at the Stedelijk. What are you focusing now more on design projects, art projects? What is coming up for 2024?
Oof, I mean, a lot. I think there's a lot of commercial and artistic projects. I have a solo show in 2025 in November in Lagos. I'm working on that already. I have a lot of institutional shows. A lot of institutions have collected my work in North America now and put in their permanent collection. So I'm speaking about shows around that. So a lot of museum shows, I'd say. Yeah.
Nice. What about you, Samuel? What can we expect to see that you can talk about?
I'm looking for legal. Legal is smiling at me at the moment. You know, there's going to be a really interesting play between luxury goods and more democratic, you know, consumer products. There will also be really a lot of my attention is going into the artistic director appointment that I've accepted for the London Design Biennale
Congratulations.
in 2025. Thank you. So it's now more so a case of ensuring that there are creative communities that can be included now the keynote's been given. So lots to come on the horizon.
Nice. And you, Michael, what can we expect from KOHLER in the coming year?
I don't think I can say a lot, to be honest. But
Are you guys going to collaborate more in the future?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
you
I
happy
think
about the
there's-
collaboration so far?
Yeah, and we've done other collaborations. We've got ongoing collaborations across the board. So I think this is an and for us. I mean, we have a very strong internal design team that's growing, scaling, instigating their own opportunities for us at KOHLER. But we're going to be fueled also by these radically unique opportunities to merge art, design, creativity, making, and probably engaging some emotion along the way, because I think that's the journey that we're on.
Thank you. I mean, you've been all very patient and quiet, so we have 5-10 minutes. I see some hands raising up already. We're gonna have to make a waiting list here. Ladies first, I'm sorry.
Hi, thank you. I would have a question about newness, like you talked about, and also your inspiration through your culture, coming from the African diaspora or as am I with the Caribbean, where we don't have many representations in terms of design, and it's very still new for us, for our generation. And I wanted to know, how do you make it this kind of newness where actually in my culture it doesn't exist really, and in Europe there is like a large historical culture, and it's kind of harder, I would say, to bring newness into this European landscape. But I think that with our culture and our inspiration we can bring it to Europe. But there is like kind of this reassessment difference of culture when it's not fully understandable for the European point of view. So I wanted to know, how do you bring your vision into that? And also, are you fully, I would say, content with the fact that your vision could never be fully understood by the masses, the main people you're trying to talk to?
I think one of the reasons why I started the studio was because of this question. As you said, there's a lack of archiving when it comes to, especially in Western East Africa. But there was a year I visited the Ethnographic Museum in Rwanda, and I realized and saw the importance of archiving. So what I try to do within the studio myself now is create archives. So the way we live is different from the way our parents lived. You understand? So because we've probably seen the world more than they have. So when we move back to our cities, the way we want to live is different. And people are projecting that within the city. You go into someone's flat in Lagos, sometimes you think you're either in London or New York. But we still have to archive it because these are new temperaments. You understand? So I try to archive as much as possible. And I also think that it's important that not just for product, but even for graphic design. You understand? So you go to South America, you go to India, you go to some cities I was in Dakar the other day, and I saw beautiful graffiti and someone creating a font for themselves, and no one was archiving it. So I think creating archives is extremely crucial. I forgot your second question.
It was about your vision,
Yeah.
and your culture, your heritage. Like,
Yeah.
how do you implement that into your work? And also, like, deal with the fact that maybe it can never be fully understood by the European vision, let's say.
I think it's funny. I think I try to be as honest as possible with my work, and a lot of people gravitate towards that. I will give an example of something that's showing at Palazzo Lita. It's a sculptural work that I've actually just done that was debuted at Design Miami. Yeah, with the salt at the entrance piece. And to be honest with you, when I came up with that concept with the curator, I thought to myself, how are people going to gravitate towards this in Miami? Lo and behold, I get to Miami and people are telling me about Cubans coming via the boat and losing family members through that journey, and it moved them. And this was just a story that I thought was a West African thing. So I always joke with people that as much as we think that we're different, we're actually the same. So yeah. I answered your questions, right?
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you.
Hi, both of y'all. Thank you so much for that amazing conversation. My name is Larry, and I have a question for both of you guys. The question is, Sam talked earlier about a life of work. It feels like it's not just the work, it's the person, the man, the creative, and the work that he's doing, and all the life that he's putting in, and everything that is going with it. And my question is, what do you guys want to leave as legacy? What do you guys want to leave here for the next generation?
That's a really good question. I think about like my gravestone all the time. To not be macabre, but it's because I have two children. I have a 6-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, and I really think about sacrifices the generation before, as Nifemi kind of attested to, put into me being able to have some type of shot at communicating within the arts. The ideal would be to leave some tangible roadmap or index of sorts. And as you were saying, it goes more so back down to the idea of archiving and ensuring that within like the lexicon of contemporary design, you see others who maybe have similar life experiences. Sometimes it can be partial to race, other times it's also partial to class as well. And it's ensuring that the socio-economic factors don't hinder the type of exposures we have on who gets to design and the gift that design can be as a human liberty. So there's always this tightrope of ensuring that there's a level of visibility, but also trying to communicate. It's more about the proclivity you have to be a human, to move between different spaces, which is a human right and a liberty. It's this fine line between racial identity and a post-racial identity that you need to be able to traverse. And I'd hope that maybe something that can be left behind in my writings or just, in an archive would be that you belong to the world. You don't necessarily have to be bound to a particular region or demographic.
Yeah, so that's why you like publication so much, publishing and archiving the work.
Absolutely. The print archive is super, super important to have like physical documents in place.
For me, I think it's like openness and open source. So it's funny, every time I make something, I tell people I break down the design process. Even though people still ask me, oh, where did you make it? How did you make it? Who's the producer? But if you go on my website, you actually see the breakdown. So for me, that openness and cheat code is there. I've tried to feed people as much as possible to say like, okay, this is how I've done it. This is how I think about it. But when it comes to commercial work, of course, I can't do that because there are clients involved. But I'm talking about the artistic side where it's like, I went specifically to Benin to work with this sandcaster. I mentioned the sandcaster's name, you understand, everything is in there. So I think for me, my legacy I would want it to be one of openness and open source. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Florence. My question would be, when working with consumer brands, how do you make something that's digestible for consumer perception, but also maintaining your design studio language, the integrity of that, while not letting your voice get lost in translation?
This is such a brilliant question, and it's always a buoyancy of sorts, right? Because as you grow your practice, you want to naturally increase the amount of clients that you can take on board, but you also don't want to be in a place where you're perhaps exhausting a particular aesthetic or language and sensibility. I think it's more so at the beginning of the practice before engaging with your potential clients, looking at establishing some type of keystone signature in place, which by design is commercial and palpable, right? And it kind of goes back down to this point of, I think it's probably quite healthy to have a personal artistic practice which is non-commercial, so that there isn't any blurring of yourself in capitalism for the most part. If we're thinking about commercial success, it's more so about the reach and the range and the digestibility, and you may be only able to hold an audience attention for, say, 2 to 3 seconds. So having a roadmap of a very simple but clear and dynamic language feels quite important. The second is, once you have that language or those keystones in place, switching between different mediums to articulate that language I found to be quite a solution to it. Hence why I mentioned moving between chalk to clay to ink to film photography or to collage, to try and find new ways to add nuance to the primary signatures that your commercial practice will have, so that as you rotate your aesthetic, each client still is getting something new from you, and the audience still feels like they're still being fed to a degree.
Maybe I can add some perspective from the inside out here. I think it's important to know your brand as a designer. I mean, I meet with a lot of creatives, and I'm sold a lot of visions and dreams, but I think so many don't know who they are at the core, and it's okay to be very specific. In fact, it's almost better to know your own brand as a creative.
Is it one last question? I mean, thank you guys. Thank you so much for your time, Michael, Samuel, Nifemi. Please, big round of applause for these 3 gentlemen.